My name is Madison, and today I'll be talking about the wicked problem of human trafficking in the United States, and specifically in Ohio. So today I'll be talking about who the victims are and who the traffickers are in the human trafficking system. I'll also be talking about trafficking in Ohio, what the rules and regulations are right now, what is the climate in Ohio and why trafficking is so prevalent in the area. I'll talk about some existing victim services and lack of services. I'll also be addressing some different problems that are within the system, specifically in Ohio, and then I'll also address some different leverage points that could potentially fix the system if they were put in place. So, who are the victims? According to Alvarez, there are an estimated 20.9 million victims of human trafficking globally, and according to Polaris, of those cases, about 1,100 of them were reported in Ohio just this past year. So it's a pretty significant number of people that are involved in the system. So who are they? So victims can be basically anybody, but according to WKBN 27 News, the largest concentration of victims are 21 to 30-year-olds that are females. And of this concentration, victims can also be runaway children and homeless youth because they leave home, they don't have anywhere else to go, they're desperate, they probably need money, and then they fall into this trap because traffickers offer them a job. And also foreign nationals and immigrants because they might be disoriented in the new United States and they get tricked into the system as well. But why are all these different people so easily tricked into human trafficking? The easy answer is that traffickers are not easy to identify. So traffickers can be basically anybody, and according to Human Trafficking Hotline, traffickers can be foreign nationals and U.S. citizens. They can be males and females, not just males. They can be family members, intimate partners, acquaintances, and strangers. So they can be lone individuals, or they can work in networks with other traffickers. They can be family members, or they can be pimps within the network. They can be businessmen, business owners, but ultimately all of these people, they are masters of manipulation, and they're looking to exploit humans for money. So that is why they're in human trafficking. And so we're talking specifically about Ohio, and the reason is that Ohio is a hotbed for human trafficking cases. This is a heat map of human trafficking cases that were reported by Polaris, and as you can see, the Midwest especially is very hot, and the region around Ohio is extremely heavy with cases. So we'll get into why that is. Ohio is ranked 5th in the nation for most human trafficking cases, according to Mullen. And the reason for this is that Ohio is a combination of rural areas and city areas, so it's very easy to travel through Ohio, it's very easy to hide in the cities and in the rural country area, and it's easy to transport victims. And Ohio has many major highways that go through Ohio. They connect in major cities of Ohio, and it also makes it very easy to travel through the state and into other states within a day's time, including Canada. And so this is actually a map of the highways, and I circled some of the connectors. So you can see in Toledo, the circles look a little off, but it's okay. In Toledo, there's major highways that connect, which Toledo is a huge hotbed for human trafficking. Cincinnati, Columbus, and actually if you look in where Youngstown is labeled, which is like kind of Alliance area, there's a lot of major highways that connect, and Alliance is actually a huge area for human trafficking pickups and drop-offs. So those are all different intersection points, and the worrying part is that a lot of those intersections of the major highways are on the borders of Ohio, so they can intersect highways, get off one highway, pick up a human trafficking victim, get back on a different one, and head a different direction. So they're basically moving very quickly, and it's very hard to track these people. And so how it works, this is kind of how it's all connected within Ohio, the victims and the traffickers. So I'm focusing specifically on runaway children for this example because every victim has a different situation. So you have runaway children in Ohio that ran away from home for whatever reason. They probably need money, they don't have any money, they have nobody to turn to, they don't want to go back home, they don't want to turn to authorities because they'll probably get turned back into home. So they're desperate, they're vulnerable, and they might be naive as well. So then you have traffickers within Ohio. They're in Ohio because it doesn't have a lot of victim services, there's major highways for them to travel through, so they know the area pretty well. The traffickers need money, so they're going to exploit humans for that money. And they're very manipulative, so if they come across a runaway child, they will probably offer him or her a job, food, money, or clothes. So once they entice that runaway child into their business, they're then trapped. So the trafficker might threaten the child and say they know their family, they'll go hurt their family if they try to get away, or they might take their identity so they have no way of escaping and getting help. So the victims are trapped. They stay within Ohio at motels or truck stops, and eventually they will probably be transported out to other places. And so the existing services right now in the United States in general, they have TSA checks at airports. So if TSA sees anybody that seems a little bit suspicious, they might stop them, pull them to the side, and investigate further. And they have caught some human trafficking cases that way. There's also a trafficking hotline available, so if a victim knows the hotline number or somebody else knows it, they can call, report the case. And there's also warning signs available online, so people can use that resource and learn what the warning signs of trafficking are and help out whatever person they saw. And then specifically in Ohio, recently in 2016, according to Force, state highway patrolmen were trained to identify trafficking cases. Also, there are mental health screening tests at mental health facilities. So if they have patients come in that might show signs of past trafficking, they might be able to identify them and help them out. And there's also truck driver training, so truck drivers can get trained at the human trafficking signs, since a lot of this happens at truck stops. And also caseworkers, if they're working with broken families or children, they might be able to identify signs of human trafficking. But the problem with all of this is that victims are too afraid. So if they're already within the system, they're too afraid to go to authorities. Normally because they're afraid they're going to be caught for a crime, because technically they're involved in prostitution and that's illegal. So a lot of victims won't go to authorities even if they have the opportunity, or they're afraid that their captors might tell their families or hurt them more, so they stay where they are. The other problem is that information is not widespread. The common person doesn't know the warning signs of a human trafficking case. So that's a very big issue. And there's also a lack of victim services. So in Ohio specifically, there are 21 counties that do not have victim services. The counties are in white, and then I listed them as well. One concerning thing about this is that there's a huge cluster of counties with no victim services at the border of Ohio, at the bottom. So that might be a very easy place for traffickers to stay, grab however many victims, and get out of Ohio without much problems. And so because of these problems, I've thought of a couple different leverage points that might help correct this system. One being restructuring information flows, another being slowing Ohio's reinforcing loop, and the third is increasing the strength of balancing loops. So information flows, according to Meadows, is, well, restructuring them is considered delivering information to a place where it wasn't going before, causing people to behave differently. So basically putting information in front of people that don't normally see it. So who knows the warning signs right now? Right now there are trafficking hotline employees that know the warning signs. There are anti-trafficking advocates that work closely with human trafficking cases, so they probably know the warning signs. And TSA and some law enforcement that have been trained to know the warning signs of human trafficking. But who needs to know? The common bystander should know. If they see a human trafficking case, they should know it and they should report it. Motel employees, where a lot of these interchanges are happening, gas station employees, truck stop employees, whatever it may be. So something needs to be implemented where this information can get put in front of common people. And I would suggest using a sign of some sort or a poster that's put in public places like restrooms at gas stations, bars, motels, where these warning signs can be easily spread, and then other people would know what they are, and they have the hotline to call when they see those types of problems. So this is just, if you see something, say something, and it lists some of the most common warning signs of human trafficking. If an older man's traveling with one woman or multiple women that are younger than him, if the women seem nervous or anxious, if they're in poor physical health or they show signs of abuse, or if they're traveling without any personal belongings or identification. Those are all some warning signs, and then at the bottom is the human trafficking hotline number. So the second leverage point would be to slow Ohio's reinforcing loop. A reinforcing loop is defined by Meadows as the more it works, the more it gains power to work some more. So some of the reinforcing loops that are occurring in Ohio right now that make trafficking easy are the high traffic highways all throughout Ohio and the intersecting highways, the the motels and truck stops that are all throughout Ohio, and the lax government regulations. So ways that we could slow down this process and slow down human trafficking overall would be to implement checkpoints at highway toll booths. So where all of those major highways are intersecting, have checkpoints where any suspicious vehicle should be stopped and searched or whatever it may be. Others would be having a procedure for motel and truck stop employees of reporting. So if they see a human trafficking case, they know what to do, because they might see it and just ignore it, or they're not really sure who to contact. So to have procedures put in place for those employees might help slow down human trafficking. And then increasing TSA checks at airports overall. So just more awareness overall would hopefully slow down human trafficking in Ohio. And the last leverage point is to increase the strength of balancing loops. So balancing loops are something that occur naturally in nature or humans can invent to keep system states within safe bounds. So they basically counteract the workings of the human trafficking system. So things that could be put in place to counteract human trafficking would be constructing more victim service centers, specifically in those counties that don't have them. A widespread distribution of information, which would be those warning signs. Increasing law enforcement training, and free public phones and restrooms. So something like this might be helpful to a victim that would happen to go into a public restroom. They have no belongings on them or identification. So having a sign that says need help, but in other languages, if it's an immigrant victim that can't speak English, it's in Spanish, Chinese, and then Arabic, but whatever languages could be put on the sign. Next to a free public phone, it would have the phone number, which hopefully they would just know, call that if you need help. And then at the bottom it says you are here in all of those languages again, and then the address of the motel, the bar, the gas station, whatever, because they might call but have no idea where they're at, so they wouldn't be able to get help. So something as simple as that in public restrooms could save a victim of trafficking. So ultimately, human trafficking might be a wicked problem, but it can be solved with the right resources and systems thinking approach.